Kay Alex Eala, binabati ka namin sa nakamit mong gintong medalya sa women's singles tennis. Success is not accidental. It is earned every time you choose to show up and you choose to rise again and again.
Eva is such a good friend of mine. Competing against each other as competitors, I think we're very accustomed.
The president of the Philippines just sent Alex Eala a personal message, not after a victory, not after a trophy, but after one of the most painful losses of her young career. And that single moment has changed everything about how this story is now being told. Let that sink in for a second. A 21-year-old girl from the Philippines walks off a Grand Slam court after a straight sets defeat, televised live across the world, and before the night is even over, the head of state of her entire nation reaches out personally. Not through a press release, not through a spokesperson. Personally. That does not happen in tennis. That barely happens in any sport. But before we get into what that message means and why it has ignited an entire country, we need to go back to Court 13 at Roland Garros, because what happened there on May 26th was far more complicated and far more painful than a simple scoreline could ever tell you. Alex Eala entered the French Open ranked world number 37. For context, that is not a wild card. That is not a lucky loser. That is a legitimate, ranked professional who had earned her place at that table through years of work, sacrifice, and a level of dedication that most people watching from their couches at 3 in the morning could not begin to imagine. And yes, 3 in the morning, because that is exactly what time Filipino fans were watching this match. Phones in hand, sleep abandoned, hearts fully invested in every single point. She had spoken before the tournament with a quiet but unmistakable confidence. She said she felt more prepared for this Grand Slam than for any before it. And people believed her, because her results through 2025 and into 2026 had given them every reason to. Then came the draw. Across the net, Eva Jovic. World number 17. In form. Dangerous. And perhaps the most painful detail of all, one of Alex Eala's closest and most genuine friends on the entire professional tour. International media immediately called it a battle of best friends. A feel-good story. Two young women who genuinely care about each other, forced to compete at the highest level on one of the biggest stages in the sport. It sounded like the setup for something beautiful. But tennis does not care about friendship. Tennis does not care about narrative. Tennis does not care about the people watching at 3 in the morning back in Manila desperately willing every point to go the right way. The match began. And within an hour, it was over. 4-6 in the first set. 2-6 in the second. A scoreline that does not lie, does not soften, and does not offer comfort to anyone who stayed up through the night hoping for something different. And then, as if the singles exit was not enough, came the news of her doubles withdrawal. One more door closing. One more moment that the Philippines had been quietly hoping for gone. In Manila, the silence that followed was heavy. Social media, which had been buzzing with hope and excitement just hours earlier, shifted tone completely. Fans who had set alarms, who had skipped sleep, who had told themselves this was finally going to be the Grand Slam where everything clicked, they were now sitting with a result that hurt in a way that goes beyond sport. Because when you follow an athlete the way Filipino fans follow Alex Eala, it is never just about tennis. It is about identity. It is about pride. It is about watching someone who looks like you, who carries your flag, who speaks to your experience, standing on a stage that your country has never truly occupied before. Every match she plays is not just a match. It is proof that the Philippines belongs there. So when she loses, it does not just sting. It lands differently. But then came the press conference. And this is where the story changed completely. Alex Eala walked into that room after a straight sets Grand Slam loss, sat down in front of the international media, and said something that stopped people in their tracks. I'm confident in myself. I'm confident in how I play, even through losses like this. And I think that's very important. Read that again slowly. She did not make excuses. She did not blame the surface. She did not hide behind the difficulty of facing a close friend or the pressure of national expectations. She sat there, 21 years old, just eliminated from a Grand Slam on live television, and spoke with the composure of someone who has already decided that this loss does not define her. That is not normal. That is genuinely not a normal response for a 21-year-old in that situation. And then she went further. Still in that same press room, still in the same conversation, she brought up Rafael Nadal. You see me and you see Rafa Nadal. He's just like a machine. Now, she did not say this to compare her titles to his. She did not say it with arrogance. She said it the way a student talks about a teacher they have never met but have studied deeply. She said it the way someone talks when they are not inspired by greatness, but are actively trying to understand it, replicate it, and build it into themselves. At 21, after a loss, in a Grand Slam press room, that is the mind of someone who is not here to participate. That is the mind of someone who is here to build something that lasts. And that is exactly what reached Malacanang Palace. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has publicly recognized Alex Eala on multiple occasions throughout 2025 and into 2026. He has called her an inspiration. He has framed her rise as part of a bigger national story, not just a sports story, but a story about what the Philippines is capable of producing, achieving, and presenting to the world. But what reportedly happened on May 26 was different from all of that, because all the previous recognition came in moments of success. After wins, after rankings climbed, after breakthrough results that gave everyone a reason to celebrate. That kind of acknowledgement is meaningful, but it is also expected. Leaders congratulate winners. That is standard. What is not standard is reaching out after a loss. What is not standard is sending a personal message to a young athlete in the immediate aftermath of a painful and public defeat, not to mourn the result, but to reinforce her value, her standing, and the fact that one scoreline at Roland Garros changes absolutely nothing about what she means to an entire nation. That distinction, the timing of it, the choice to show up in a difficult moment rather than only in triumphant ones, is what has shifted the entire conversation around her 2026 season. Because support after a win is easy. Anyone can do that. Support after a loss, real, immediate, personal support, that is something different. That tells an athlete something that rankings cannot tell them, that prize money cannot tell them, and that even the most passionate fan comments cannot fully deliver. It tells them that their value is not conditional, that they are not only celebrated when they succeed, but seen, acknowledged, and valued even when they fall short. For a 21-year-old still building her identity at the top level of professional tennis, that kind of message does not just feel good. It changes something internally. It shifts the foundation she is standing on. And the foundation already had more to it than people sometimes remember. This is a player who, earlier in 2026, reached a top 30 ranking, a number that represents years of accumulated work, travel, sacrifice, and an almost obsessive commitment to improvement. A player carrying a season record of around 18 wins and 13 losses, not perfect, not dominant, but consistent enough and competitive enough at the highest level to tell you that she is not going anywhere. She is a player who grew up in a country with no Grand Slam tradition, no widespread clay court infrastructure, no established professional tennis pipeline feeding young talent into the system. No roadmap that she could simply follow. She has been building that roadmap herself, match by match, tournament by tournament, year by year. And she is doing it at a time when Asian women's tennis is shifting faster than it ever has before. China is producing elite contenders. Japan is rebuilding with young emerging talent. And now the Philippines, through one player, one story, one 21-year-old who references Rafa Nadal in a post-loss press conference, is entering that conversation in a way it never has before. That is the bigger picture, and it is impossible to ignore. What comes next is equally impossible to ignore. The grass court season is already underway. Wimbledon qualifying and main draw schedules are set. After that comes the North American hardcourt swing, the swing that leads directly into the US Open Series and ultimately Flushing Meadows in August. 3 major windows. 3 completely different surfaces. 3 opportunities to take everything that happened in Paris, the loss, the composure, the press conference, the presidential message, the Nadal comparison, and turn it into fuel. 3 chances to write a completely different kind of ending to this chapter. And here is what makes this genuinely worth paying attention to beyond the emotion and the national pride and the political dimension of a presidential message. The results are real. The ranking is real. The composure she showed in that press room is real. The mindset she is developing, the one that looks at Rafa Nadal and sees a machine worth studying rather than a legacy worth envying, that is real. She lost in Paris. That is real too. And it hurt.
Genuinely.
But a player who processes defeat the way Alex Eala processed that defeat on May 26, who sits down in front of the world and talks about confidence rather than collapse, is not a player you write off after a first-round exit. She is a player you watch very, very carefully for what comes next. A full transparency note before we close. The specific details of any private communication between Malacanang and Alex Eala have not been independently confirmed by major outlets. What is verified is the president's repeated public recognition of her achievements, the result of her match against Jovic, and the composure she showed in the immediate aftermath. The rest has taken shape through Filipino fan communities and discussions, and given the documented pattern of support that already exists, it is a story that feels entirely consistent with everything we already know. So, here is the question worth sitting with right now. Do you think this wave of national attention and reported presidential support is the spark that pushes Alex Eala into the top 20 and deeper into a Wimbledon draw this summer? Or does her real defining moment still lie ahead on the hard courts of New York? The grass is already growing. The matches are already being played. And every single one of them is adding another line to a story that, if you have been following from the beginning, you already know is nowhere close to finished. 2/2